Hello my friends, I noticed the other day that I haven't seen a single video talking about how much damage Gathering Storm does compared to other high damage supers like Blade Barrage when paired with Star Eater scales. I've seen several videos talking about Arc Hunter's insane ad clear capability and builds pairing it with Assassin's Cowl and Liar's Handshake, but I rarely see people running it with Star Eater scales. Now, those other builds are great and a hell of a lot of fun, but for raids, specifically boss encounters, I typically want to focus more on higher damage to the boss. Gathering Storm with Star Eater scales does this, while still maintaining its ridiculous ad clear capabilities even without running Assassin's Cowl or Liar's Handshake. Maybe those shine a bit more in master raids or other activities with a lot of tanky champions, but even in a master raid I'd probably go for Star Eater scales to amp up my DPS a bit more. I think it's a real shame Gathering Storm hasn't gotten more love yet, because this has become my main go-to hunter class for raid bosses. Before I get into my build, let me show you what it's doing damage wise. So far in my testing, Blade Barrage with the knock 'em down aspect and Star Eater scales can still do more damage than Gathering Storm. Blade Barrage has the benefit of its burst damage, whereas Gathering Storm needs time, about 10 seconds, to do all of its damage. However, most bosses in the game allow plenty of time for Gathering Storm to do its thing. Another massive benefit to Gathering Storm is that it's much more consistent. You see, Blade Barrage needs almost all of its projectiles to hit the target for it to compete against Gathering Storm from a total damage perspective. This can be extremely hard to do at longer distances, and even at optimal range, floating backwards slightly while casting and using the Ember of Beams fragment, the projectiles don't always track perfectly to the intended target, especially with other objects around such as low ceilings or the bees from Caretaker's backpack. Because of this, you can get widely varying damage results from Blade Barrage. I tested this about a dozen times on the Grasp of Avarice Ogre and got damage results ranging from 375,000 all the way up to 612,000, 612 being about the highest I could get. Keep in mind the boss is massive with a large hitbox, this boss area is wide open, all their enemies were dead, and there are no other objects in my way that these projectiles could hit. I can't really think of a more ideal boss to hit with Blade Barrage, and there would still be projectiles missing from time to time. On the other hand, Gathering Storm's damage results were much more consistent because you just have a single projectile. When hitting the target directly, I was getting results ranging from around 500,000 to 533,000. It's also much easier to hit from longer range and easier to avoid objects in the environment. Please note these numbers are based on no other buffs or debuffs, and I'm not using the Thunderous Retort seasonal artifact mod. All that said, Gathering Storm does have one major downside and dimension. Similar to several other damage over time abilities and weapons, it won't stack with other Gathering Storm supers. If you throw a Gathering Storm staff at a boss while another Gathering Storm is already active, you will still do the initial impact damage, but the damage over time ticks from your Gathering Storm will not affect the boss until the already active Gathering Storm has completed its damage over time. While this hurts its viability, most raid bosses' damage phases allow plenty of time to fit in at least 2, sometimes even 3 full Gathering Storms before the damage phase ends. You just simply need to coordinate with the other Arc Hunters in your team. Now that we got that out of the way, let's set up the build. I do have a Destiny Item Manager loadout link in the description below, but for those of you that don't want to go through the whole thing, it's pretty much as simple as Gathering Storm with Star Eater scales and making sure you're making enough Orbs of Power to get your super back between damage phases and max out your Feasts of Light. However, there are a few ways to optimize it to accomplish this that I know some of you just won't think about unless some streamer or other content creator tells you to. So here we go. Starting with our abilities. For our class ability, we are running Gambler's Dodge. This will recharge your melee ability when dodging near an enemy. Triple Jump is kind of the obvious choice for PvE. For our charged melee, we have Combination Blow. Each charged melee kill will increase your melee damage for a short duration, stacks up to 3 times. And for our grenade, you can run whatever you want. I personally like to use Pulse Grenade, but whatever you want is fine. For aspects, we've got Lethal Current. After dodging, your next melee attack has increased lunge range, jolts the target, and creates a damaging aftershock. This right here is a big reason why Arc Hunter is insanely good for ad clear now. I'm also running Flow State. I'm mostly using this because my dumbass will accidentally activate Tempest Strike if I'm using that, but it is also nice to get yourself amplified quickly because that will help us create Orbs of Power with one of the fragments we're using. The dodge, resilience, and reload speed benefits are also super nice, of course. Fragments. We've got Spark of Resistance, more damage resistance when surrounded by enemies. The term surrounded typically means close to 3 or more enemies. Spark of Amplitude, rapidly defeating targets while amplified creates an Orb of Power. This build depends on gathering Orbs of Power to not only get your super back quickly between damage phases, but also to buff your super damage. So this is super important, especially since you should be getting amplified pretty quickly with flow state. The last couple you use are kind of optional. If you feel another fragment will suit you better, go for it, but I'm running Spark of Shock to jolt targets with my grenades, and Spark of Magnitude to cause my lingering grenades to last longer. I feel this just helps a bit with the ad clear side of things. Moving on to armor and mods. Obviously this is also running the exotic boots, Star Eater scales, their perk being Feast of Light. If you're living under a rock or are new to Destiny and don't know what these do, once your super energy is full, picking up Orbs of Power will give you stacks of Feast of Light up to a maximum of 4. Feast of Light increases the damage dealt by your super ability. Stacks of Feast of Light are removed once you cast your super or if you die. Starting with the important mods, we've got Hands On. This is an arc mod that allows you to gain bonus super energy with each melee kill, helping you get your super back while you're dancing around and punching all the ads. I'm also leaving room for a Siphon mod. This exact one you use will depend on your main ad clear weapon, but you would want to run either harmonic or kinetic, which means you should be doing some ad clear with either an arc weapon or a kinetic weapon to help generate more orbs. The nice thing about this is that once you're amplified, you should try to get a couple multi-kills with your weapon. Between your Siphon mod and Spark of Amplitude, you will create 2 orbs of power with each multi-kill instead of just 1 if you're just using a Siphon mod, or just 1 if you're just using Spark of Amplitude. They do build on top of each other. Pretty much every mod after this is optional. Mine is set up to use an arc heavy DPS weapon, so it utilizes arc elemental wells to proc Font of Might, as well as giving me a bit more uptime on my grenades. But if you want to lean heavier into ad clear, maybe you want to go even deeper into grenade combat style mods such as Explosive Wellmaker and Well of Ordnance, or maybe Elemental Charge paired with Firepower, or you could sprinkle in Heal Thyself or Well of Life to give you some healing. That's pretty much all I've got for you. I'll let some more gameplay play out in the background, but to give you a quick recap on why I think you should be using this. Its benefits include hella high damage, one of the highest damaging supers in the game, still a quick cast super so you can throw it and continue to damage with your weapons, rather than spending most of the damage phase in your super. It has fairly consistent damage, you have a single projectile so it's easier to hit your target, especially at larger distances, and it has top tier ad clearing capabilities already built into the subclass. Its downsides include you can use only one at a time, so you must coordinate with any other arc hunters in your team. If you miss, it can suck. It does have a large AoE, so if you just miss slightly, it will still do the damage over time, just minus the impact damage. But if you completely miss, then it really sucks. Depending on the boss, it may just bounce off of them if you don't hit their damage point perfectly. Golgroth comes to mind if you happen to miss his stomach. Even just hitting one of the little flaps, partially covering his stomach, the arc staff will just bounce off of him. And lastly, if you're directly comparing it to Blade Barrage, it also has the downside of not being able to make you and your team radiant with Acrobat's Dodge or Amber of Torches. Anyway, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Remember, I stream Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday over on Twitch, and I spend the majority of my time helping my fellow Guardians run raids. I would love to help you if you're interested. I also encourage you to join my Discord, link in the description below, and feel free to ask me any questions or just tell me my build sucks there or in the comments below. Love ya.